The chicken grease never truly washes off. No matter how many times I scrub my hands, I can still feel it. Thick, clinging, like the memory of something you try to forget but can't. That night, like most nights, I was on my knees in the back of the KFC, scraping congealed oil from under the fryers with a plastic spatula that had seen better days. My back ached, and my knees, oh Lord, my knees had given up complaining. They just throbbed, rhythmically, like an old clock ticking toward some invisible deadline. The manager, a boy young enough to be my grandson, tossed me a mop without looking. "You missed a spot, Marianne." I nodded. I always nodded. It was past 2 a.m. when I got home. The bus from the strip mall dropped me off 4 blocks away, and I walked the rest, shoes in one hand, keys in the other, praying the porch light hadn't gone out. Inside, I peeled off the uniform, the stiff shirt, the elastic waist pants stained at the knees, and washed my hands. Again. They were cracked and raw from hot water and cleaning chemicals, but that wasn't the kind of pain that lingered. I made myself tea, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the fridge where Henry's college tuition receipt was pinned with a magnet shaped like a smiling sun. $8,250. Housing, books, meal plan, paid in full, due again in 3 months. When he came home that weekend, I was still in uniform. I'd misread the schedule and had to cover a morning shift. He walked into the kitchen and looked at me. Not with gratitude, not with warmth, but with that faint wrinkle between his brows, the one that always meant disapproval. He didn't say hello, didn't ask how my shift was. He just stared and said, "Can't you get a real job, Mom?" I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have words, but because the ones I had wouldn't have come out right, wouldn't have sounded the way a mother should sound. Instead, I reached behind me, took the tuition receipt off the fridge, folded it in half, and put it in my purse. "Where are you going?" he asked, confused by the silence. "To the office," I said, slipping on my coat. "You want a real job, Henry? Let's start with real consequences." He didn't follow me, just sat there, still frowning, as I walked out the door. The sun was too bright for March, but the wind was sharp. I walked to the corner and caught the same bus I took to work, rode it past the fried chicken signs and payday loan stores, past the gas station where they knew me by name, all the way downtown to the bursar's office at the university. The woman behind the plexiglass smiled politely. I'd seen her before. She had kind eyes. "I need to cancel future payments," I said. "For my son, Henry Wilson, freshman, business administration." She blinked. "All payments?" "Yes," I said. "Effective immediately." She clicked through her screen. "There's a deposit pending for next term. Housing, meal plan, books again. Do you want to?" "No. Cancel it all." There was a pause. "You'll lose the priority registration benefits," she said gently. "And housing might not—" "I understand." I took the folded receipt from my purse, unfolded it, and signed the back. "Transfer any refundable balance to me, not him." She didn't ask why, just nodded, printed a form, and handed me a pen. By the time I stepped back onto the sidewalk, the wind had picked up, and the sky had started to change. The clouds rolled in low and heavy, like they were settling in for the long haul. I didn't go home right away. I went to the bakery on Jefferson, the one Henry used to love when he was little, and bought myself a slice of lemon pie. Ate it with a fork that bent too easily and lips that didn't tremble. I'd spent 27 years being everything to that boy. Nurse, tutor, banker, cook. I'd scrubbed toilets and floors and deep fryers so he could have quiet libraries and clean dorm rooms. And now, finally, I was done pretending that was enough for him. That night, I didn't go to work. I turned off my phone. I sat in my quiet little kitchen and waited for something in me to snap back into place. It didn't. But something else happened. Something better. When Henry was born, I was 29 and already tired. Not from him, never from him, but from the world. From a husband who called me lazy when I couldn't get the baby to sleep, who vanished for nights at a time and came back smelling of whiskey and perfume that wasn't mine. I stayed 6 years longer than I should have, thinking a child needed a full house, even if half of it was broken. When Thomas finally left, or rather, when I told him not to come back, Henry was 8, and I had $210 in the bank. We moved into a 2-bedroom rental on the south side, where the heat barely worked and the floor sloped toward the kitchen. I took every job I could find, cleaning houses, folding clothes at the laundromat, even babysitting other people's kids while Henry sat in the corner with his coloring books. At night, I'd wash my hands in the sink and look at him asleep on the couch, wondering how much longer I could pretend I had things under control. There wasn't time to think about dreams. There was only money, or the lack of it. So I made a rule: no pride, no panic, no complaints. Just get through the day, then get through the next. When Henry was 12, he got a perfect score in math. His teacher called me in and said, "This one's special, Mrs. Wilson." I smiled, but my heart ached, because I knew what came next. Schools with fees, books I couldn't afford, programs for kids who didn't eat cereal for dinner. But we managed. I took extra shifts, picked up Sunday cleaning jobs at office buildings downtown. Henry never knew I walked home in the dark with my pepper spray clenched in my hand. I never told him. In high school, he started staying late at the library. He was polite, well-spoken. Teachers loved him. I'd hear them say, "He must come from such a good home." I'd smile, nodding, while my feet bled inside the cheap flats I wore until they split. By senior year, he was applying to colleges I couldn't pronounce. Got into 3. Chose the one downtown, close enough to stay connected, far enough to pretend he'd grown up somewhere else. I remember the day we visited the campus. He walked ahead of me, pointing things out: the quad, the labs, the student center. I followed, proud and aching. We sat on a bench near the admissions office while he scrolled through his email. "Mom," he said, eyes wide, "they gave me a partial scholarship, almost half the tuition." Almost. I smiled. "We'll find a way." I didn't tell him. That meant I'd have to cancel the insurance on the car or stop paying off the dental bill from his braces. I didn't tell him I was going to sell the engagement ring I hadn't looked at in 20 years. He moved into the dorms in late August. I hugged him tight in the parking lot, smelling the fabric softener on his brand new t-shirts, the ones I'd bought in bulk from the discount store. "Call me if you need anything," I said. "I will." He smiled, distracted, already watching a group of kids tossing a frisbee near the fountain. I walked back to the car and sat there for a long time, hands on the wheel, watching the students move like fish in a bright, clean stream. I wondered if any of their mothers were cleaning bathrooms to buy their kids overpriced textbooks. I started at KFC that fall. Graveyard shifts. It paid slightly better than my last job and had just enough hours to cover housing and books. I told them I preferred nights, fewer customers, less fuss. But the truth was, it let me be invisible. I could cry in the supply closet if I needed to. No one would hear. Once, in November, I dropped off a care package at Henry's dorm. Snacks, cough syrup, fresh socks. I left it with the RA, didn't want to embarrass him. That night, I got a text. Thanks. Didn't have to do that. No heart, no smiley face. Just that. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. Not because it hurt, just because it made me feel smaller than I wanted to feel. I told myself it was a phase, that growing up meant pushing away. But the further he pushed, the less I recognized the boy I used to tickle under the chin to make laugh. I still packed his favorite cookies when I could. Still checked the weather and worried about him walking across campus without gloves. And then one night, just last week, I got off my shift, came home in my oil-stained uniform, and found him sitting at the kitchen table. He was on break, back for the weekend, and had let himself in with his old key. He looked at me. My frizzy hair, my red hands, the brown bag I carried my lunch in, and said those words. "Can't you get a real job, Mom?" And that was the end of something. Not of my love, that doesn't end, but of my silence. The first time I walked into the KFC, I wore my church shoes. Patent leather, low heel, tight at the toes. I hadn't bought new work shoes in years and figured they'd do until I had my first paycheck. By the end of that shift, both shoes were ruined and my right heel bled through my sock. I never told anyone. I limped home in the dark, shoved the shoes under the bed, and wrapped my foot in paper towels soaked in rubbing alcohol. That was nearly 2 years ago. Since then, I'd become a part of the furniture. The night crew called me Miss Mary, and while most of them were young enough to be my grandchildren, they respected me in their own way. Darnell, the assistant manager, always made sure I got the less heavy lifting tasks when my hands started to shake. Rosa, the cashier, left me little containers of mashed potatoes on my break, even when she was only supposed to hand out expired cookies. It was greasy, thankless work. I came home each night smelling like fryer oil and disappointment, but it paid on time, and I could walk to the bus stop, and nobody judged me when I needed to sit down for 5 minutes in the mop closet. There was a kind of quiet dignity in that life, in sweeping crumbs from under the tables at midnight, in refilling the ketchup pumps, in folding the red and white uniforms in the back room while the kids played music too loud on their phones. I told myself, this is just for now, just until Henry finishes college. Then maybe I'll find something less brutal, something where my knees don't feel like broken jars every time I bend. But every month, the tuition invoice came. Room, board, books, lab fees. Then there were the extras, a new laptop when his stopped charging, bus fare when he wanted to come home, an online course that wasn't included, but really important. I sent what I could, took more shifts, skipped my own doctor's appointments to avoid copays, ate eggs and toast for weeks so he could have real meals. He never asked where the money came from, and I never told him. That maybe was my mistake. Once Rosa caught me massaging my wrist at the sink, trying to loosen the tightness in the joints. "You okay, Miss Mary?" she asked. I nodded. "Just old bones. They bark now and then." She gave me a look that didn't believe me. "You shouldn't have to work this hard." "Neither should you, baby," I said. "But we do what we have to." Sometimes during my 15-minute break, I'd sit outside by the dumpster and look up at the sky, letting the cold air dry the sweat on my neck. If I sat too long, the manager would tap the window. Time's up. But I didn't mind. Not then. Because all of it, the pain, the long nights, the missed meals, was for Henry, my boy. My smart, bright college kid with the future I never got to have. I imagined him in lecture halls, taking notes, raising his hand, smiling with that sharp edge of pride he always had when he got something right. I imagined him successful, in a suit, talking to people with confidence, and I imagined him someday telling someone, "My mom made it possible." That imagined moment carried me through more nights than I can count, but it never came. What came instead was his silence. The weeks between his calls stretched out longer. His visits became shorter. When he did come by, he looked at my furniture like it embarrassed him, at the chipped paint on the windowsill, at the dent in the toaster. Once he asked, "Mom, why don't you move somewhere better?" I laughed, but there was no joy in it. "With what money, Henry?" He looked away, like the question annoyed him. That was the first time I thought maybe he'd forgotten the years I'd patched holes in his shoes with glue, forgotten the lunches I skipped so he could eat, forgotten how I stayed up late sewing his prom suit because we couldn't afford a new one. But I told myself it was stress. College kids had a lot on their plate. I excused it. I always did, until the day he said it out loud. "Can't you get a real job, Mom?" Real. As if the burns on my hands were imaginary. As if the paychecks I used to cover his rent came from a fairy godmother. As if waking up at 4 p.m. to start a night shift at 6 wasn't real enough. I didn't cry when he said it. I didn't even flinch. I just looked at him, and I saw him. Really saw him. Not as my boy, not as my baby, but as a grown man who couldn't see me anymore. A man who'd become someone I didn't raise. Someone I didn't recognize. That was the beginning of the end. The house was quiet when I came back from the college office. Henry was still at the kitchen table, same spot, hands folded, mouth set in that tight, flat line. He looked up when I walked in, probably expecting me to explain, to soften what had just happened, but I didn't owe him softness anymore. Not after that. "You canceled it?" he asked. I set my purse on the counter. "I did." He pushed his chair back. "Jesus, Mom, are you trying to ruin my life?" I almost laughed. Ruin his life. I'd spent mine building his. Brick by brick, meal by meal, check by check. I'd emptied every drawer for him. Drawers of time, drawers of health, drawers of self. And now he stood in my kitchen, furious that I'd stopped handing over the last scraps of what I had left. "You'll need to speak with the financial aid office," I said calmly. "Maybe they can help." He scoffed, like they're just going to hand me $8,000. "They might," I said, "or you might have to work." He crossed his arms. "I can't do both, school and a job. I'll fall behind." I nodded. "I know, it's hard. I've done it." He opened his mouth, then shut it, looking away. There was a pause where the clock on the wall ticked like a bomb. I could feel my pulse in my palms, not from anger, from the exhaustion of restraint. "You said you'd help me finish college," he muttered. "I said I'd support you," I replied. "And I have. But support isn't the same thing as erasure, Henry. I didn't sign up to disappear so you could thrive." He paced the room now, rubbing the back of his neck like he did when he was 10 and knew he was in trouble. "You don't get it. College isn't like it was in your day. Everything's expensive, competitive. I have to keep up." "I know," I said again, softer this time. "That's why I worked nights at 68. So you could keep up." He glanced at me then, eyes flickering, unsure whether to argue or retreat. I watched him weigh his next sentence, and I could see the old boy in him, the one who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and say, "For you, Mom." But that boy was buried now, buried under layers of entitlement and shame and the quiet, invisible rot that grows when someone forgets where they came from. "People don't respect workers like you," he said suddenly, You don't understand what that's like." I blinked. Oh, I understand. I walked to the sink, turned on the tap, and began rinsing the tea mug I'd used that morning. My hands, red and calloused, trembled slightly under the water. "You think I don't know what it's like to be looked down on?" I said. "To have customers throw their food wrappers at me? To have teenagers laugh when I wipe their table? To be told to clean faster, smile more, stop smelling like grease?" I turned off the tap. I know disrespect, Henry, but I also know the kind that stings worst, the kind that comes from your own blood. He didn't reply. We stood there, two people who'd once been each other's whole world, now separated by silence so wide it felt like another country. "I'm going upstairs," I said. "I've got work tonight." "You're still going in?" he asked, incredulous. "Yes," I said. "I'm not the one who quits when things get uncomfortable." I climbed the stairs slowly. My knees protested with every step, but I didn't let them stop me. That pain was mine. It reminded me I was still standing, still choosing. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the closet. My uniform hung on a hook, clean, pressed, smelling faintly of lemon detergent and something burned. I didn't want to put it on, not because I was ashamed, because I was tired. Bone tired. Soul tired. Tired of turning myself inside out for someone who didn't see me anymore, who didn't want to see me. Downstairs, I heard Henry open the front door and slam it behind him. No goodbye. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The fan turned slowly, slicing the silence into pieces. Maybe I wouldn't go in tonight after all. Maybe, for once, I'd let the grease settle without me. I didn't go in that night. I called Darnell at 5:15 and told him I wasn't feeling well. It wasn't a lie. I felt unwell in a way that had no name, that sat under my skin like a bruise waiting to surface. He didn't ask questions, just said, "You rest, Miss Mary. We'll hold it down." I spent the night sitting at the kitchen table, the one Henry had left without pushing in his chair. I didn't touch it. I just stared at the space he had occupied, wondering how many more words I should have said years ago and how many more I would now hold back forever. The silence in the house was not peaceful. It hummed with questions I'd never had time to ask. Around midnight, I pulled out the envelope from the drawer, the one marked EDU tuition, Henry. Inside were receipts, transfer slips, photocopies of payment confirmations, neatly stacked, labeled by semester. It wasn't the amount that stunned me. I knew it by heart. But the consistency. Every month, like clockwork. Rent, food, books, emergency fees. One after another, like I was building a staircase out of money, hoping one day he'd use it to come back to me. And now I had to ask myself, for what? For what had I peeled potatoes with blistered palms? For what had I skipped lunch so he could have his protein shakes and meal plans? For what had I tucked little $20 bills into care packages, even when he didn't say thank you? I'd told myself I was investing, but it wasn't in his future, not really. It was in love, in being loved. And now, at 68, I realized I'd been trying to buy back something that should have been free. I sat there until the first light broke through the blinds. The house felt different in the morning, less like mine, more like something I was just renting from time. My knees ached from sitting too long, but I didn't get up right away. Instead, I opened another drawer. This one held the binder. Not many people have binders for their lives, but I do. Labeled tabs, bills, medical, house, legal, and one more, estate. I hadn't looked in that last tab in years. Inside was my will. Drafted 5 years ago, The day I paid off the house in full and felt, for the first time, a sliver of peace. Back then, I'd listed Henry as the sole beneficiary. Of course I had. Who else was there? I'd even written a little note to be sealed with it. To my beloved son, for whom I gave everything I had and all I ever hoped to be. I stared at those words now, like they belonged to someone else. A woman I remembered being, but no longer recognized. By 8 a.m., I was dressed, not in my uniform, but in my church slacks and a clean blouse. The kind of outfit people take seriously. I slipped the binder into my tote bag, along with the receipts and a bottle of water, and I walked to the bus stop. First stop, the bank. The branch manager, Carol, had known me for years. She always offered me peppermint candy from the little dish on her desk and called me Ms. Wilson, even though we'd shared lemon bars at church picnics. I told her what I wanted. No more tuition transfers, no more automatic payments. Freeze the linked card. And, I added, I want to open a new account, a trust account. Carol raised her eyebrows gently. In whose name? I smiled for the first time in days. My niece, Rachel. She's 17. Calls me every Sunday. Brought me soup when I had the flu last winter. Wants to be a nurse. Carol nodded, typing as I spoke. A good reason. By the time I left the bank, the account was open. The funds moved. I held the paperwork like it was a passport to a country I hadn't known I could visit. One where I mattered, where my labor meant something more than just survival for someone else. Next stop, the lawyer's office. Mr. Hammond was old enough to remember when gas was $1 a gallon. He'd written my will originally, and when I walked into his office, he stood up like I was royalty. Ms. Wilson, he said, to what do I owe the pleasure? I need to make some changes, I said, placing the binder on the desk between us. He opened it carefully, flipping through the tabs. Still want everything to go to your son? No, I said quietly. I don't. He didn't ask why. That's why I liked him. I want to update the beneficiary, I said, and put in a clause, a trust for Rachel, with protections. He nodded. Understood. As he typed, I looked out the window. The sun was climbing. The city moved on. People with briefcases, backpacks, little dogs. Everyone trying to get somewhere. I had no idea where I was going now. But for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly where not to return. When I stepped outside, the wind caught my blouse and lifted it slightly. It felt like a hand brushing my back, and I didn't shiver. The phone started ringing just after I stepped off the bus. First call, Henry. Second call, Henry again. Third call, unknown number. Likely him using someone else's phone. I didn't answer. Not because I was being cruel, but because I'd already said everything I needed to say. And most of it had been with actions, not words. Let him sit with the silence for once. Back home, I made myself a grilled cheese sandwich. Real butter, the good kind, the one I used to save for his visits. I ate it slowly, in the same chair where I used to wait for his texts. None came now, just calls. Persistent, urgent, ringing into the corners of my small kitchen like the past trying to break in. When I finally picked up on the sixth call, I didn't say hello. Mom? His voice was sharp, stressed, the tone of a man who'd suddenly remembered where all his advantages came from. I'm here, I said. Not warm, not cold. What the hell is going on? He snapped. I just got an email from the financial office saying everything's been reversed. My dorm fee bounced. That's correct. Why? His voice cracked slightly. What are you doing? Setting boundaries, I replied. There was a pause. Mom, this isn't a joke. They could kick me out. I could lose my spot. You won't lose your spot, I said calmly. You'll just have to find a way to pay for it. Plenty of students work part-time or take loans. I thought you didn't want me in debt. I didn't, I said. And I still don't. But I also didn't plan to be humiliated in my own kitchen. Things change. The silence on the line grew dense. I didn't mean it like that, he muttered. You said I should get a real job, Henry. He sighed. I was frustrated. You were ungrateful. Another silence. Look, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't realize how hard it's been for you. Did you ever ask? I asked gently. Even once? His breath hitched. I just thought, I don't know. You made it look easy. That was the part that almost made me laugh. Easy. My hands looked like cracked porcelain. My back hurt every morning. My sleep came in 4-hour pockets, interrupted by joint pain and nightmares of falling behind on bills. Easy? I'm not your enemy, Henry, I said. But I'm not your safety net anymore either. Not if you treat me like a rag you wipe your feet on. I never said you didn't have to. You said enough with your tone, your silences, the way you looked at me in that uniform. He didn't respond. I softened, just slightly. I've spent years loving you more than I've loved myself. I don't regret it, but I won't keep paying for that love like it's a subscription service. It doesn't come with a monthly fee. I just wish you'd talk to me first. I did. You just weren't listening. He sighed again, a long, defeated sound. So what now? You figure it out, I said. You're a smart young man. You've got time, energy, opportunity. You'll be fine. And you? He asked, voice suddenly small. I looked out the window. The sun had dipped behind the neighbor's garage. The house across the street still had its Halloween decorations up. Paper ghosts flapping in the breeze like they didn't know the holiday had passed. I'll be better than fine, I said. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm standing on my own 2 feet again. He was quiet. Then, almost grudgingly, Are you really giving the money to Rachel? She calls me every week, I said. Came over when I was sick. Helped me fix my porch railing. She sees me, Henry. And that matters more than blood. But I'm your son. And I'm your mother, I said gently. Not your maid, not your bank, just your mother, who deserves respect. I get it, he said after a pause. I do. I'll figure something out. I know you will. And I meant it. We ended the call there, not with tears, not with shouting. Just a strange, fragile truce floating between us like a bridge too damaged to cross, but not quite broken. That night, I didn't go to work again. I sat on the porch, a blanket around my shoulders, and watched the stars blink one by one into the sky. It was cold. My bones ached, but I felt warm, because maybe this was what freedom felt like. Not loud, just real. Rachel showed up the next afternoon with a Tupperware container full of cornbread and a smile that didn't ask for anything. She didn't call first, just knocked like people used to, like family used to, as if the act of showing up itself was love. Grand Aunt Mary, she said, holding the container like a prize. Mom made chili, and I told her it's a sin to eat chili without cornbread. I let her in. My hands were still damp from scrubbing the bathroom floor. Not for Henry, not anymore, just because I wanted it clean. My house, my rhythm. She set the Tupperware on the kitchen counter and turned to me. You look rested. I didn't work last night. Rachel blinked. You skipped a shift? You never skip. I think I might skip a few more, I said. Maybe permanently. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. Rachel wasn't like Henry. She didn't pry with expectation. She waited. We sat at the kitchen table, cornbread between us, warm enough to let the butter melt into its cracks. I hadn't eaten lunch. I hadn't wanted to, until now. "I'm setting up a trust," I told her as I cut a slice. "In your name." She froze. "What? You heard me. Aunt Mary, no. You don't have to." "I don't," I agreed. "But I want to." She swallowed hard. Her eyes, big and brown like her mother's, shimmered. "Why?" "Because you show up," I said. "Because when I call, you answer. Because when I'm sick, you bring soup. Because when you talk to me, you see me. Not just what I can do for you." Rachel wiped at her eyes quickly. "That's just being decent. You'd be surprised how rare that is." She didn't argue, just nodded, quietly, like she knew exactly what I meant. "I went to the lawyer," I said. "Signed the papers. The money I was using for Henry's tuition? It's yours now, for school, or rent, or whatever future you want to build." "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't need to say anything," I replied. "Just promise me one thing." She looked up. "Don't let the world make you hard. Be kind, but don't be a fool. If someone shows you they don't respect you, believe them. And don't pay them to keep doing it." Rachel reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were soft, warm. Mine, dry and cracked. It didn't matter. "You're the strongest woman I know," she said. "If I turn out even half as decent, I'll be okay." We didn't speak for a while after that. Just finished our cornbread, sipping tea in silence. A silence that comforted, not judged. When she left, I gave her the notarized copies, sealed in an envelope. "Keep these safe," I said. "They matter now." She nodded. "So do you." After she was gone, I opened the window a little. The house had gotten stuffy. The breeze that came in smelled like late autumn. Dry leaves, damp dirt, a touch of chimney smoke from somewhere down the street. I stood there for a while, letting it in. I thought about what it meant to grow old with your head held high. Not proud. That wasn't quite it. But upright. Whole. Not bent around someone else's needs. My back would always hurt. My knees would never be new again. But I had taken something back that mattered. And even though my heart still ached, it did. I knew I hadn't done it out of bitterness. I'd done it out of clarity. Later that night, I sat with a notebook and started writing a list. Not a bucket list. Not dreams or fantasies. Just a list of things I wanted. Small things. A new set of sheets. Real leather shoes that didn't blister. A trip to the botanical gardens I used to love. I paused halfway through and stared at the page. My handwriting had changed. It shook now, slanted more to the right. But it was mine. I'd been signing my name on other people's dreams for too long. Now I was writing my own. The knock came just as I was sweeping the front porch. I wasn't expecting anyone, certainly not from work. But when I opened the door, there stood Shonda, my former co-worker from the night shift at KFC. She held a small paper bag in one hand and wore the same tired ponytail I'd seen her tie and retie 1,000 times behind the fryer. "I heard you weren't coming back," she said without ceremony. "Figured that meant you finally snapped or finally got smart. Either way, I brought muffins." She handed me the bag before I could answer. I stepped aside to let her in. The last time we'd seen each other, we were in the break room at 2:45 a.m., splitting a soggy pack of saltines because neither of us remembered to bring lunch. We didn't talk much then. Too tired. Too sore. But some people you don't need to talk to. The silence says enough. I made tea while she sat at the kitchen table, looking around like she was seeing it for the first time. Smells like lemon in here, like a home. I smiled. Not like fried oil and floor cleaner. She nodded. God, the things that smell clings to. I poured her tea and sat across from her. So, she said, dunking a muffin into her cup without shame, you really done? I am. She studied me for a moment. You tell your boy? I hesitated, then nodded. I did. Canceled the payments. Told him he's on his own now. Shonda let out a slow whistle. Well, damn. We sat there quietly for a while, sipping and chewing. Then she said something that stuck. You know, she said, you were the one who kept that place from breaking me. Watching you work like that, calm, quiet, never complaining, it made me feel like I could do it too. I blinked. I never said much. No, she agreed. But you showed it. That it's possible to survive without bitterness. That there's a way to hold your dignity even when your hands are wet with fryer grease. I didn't know what to say to that. It was the kind of thing no one had ever told me before. Not even Henry. Especially not Henry. I stayed too long, I said softly. Not just at that job. In that way of living. Giving and waiting for gratitude that never came. Shonda looked at me, eyes sharp but not unkind. You didn't stay too long. You stayed long enough to know when to leave. That, I realized, was the difference. Leaving isn't a failure. It's a choice. And I had finally made mine. She finished her tea, wiped her hands on a napkin, and stood. I should get going. Kids will be home soon. But I'm glad I saw you. Me too. At the door, she paused. What are you going to do now? I don't know, I admitted. But I'm going to do it without asking permission. She grinned. That's a hell of a start. After she left, I stood in the doorway for a long while, watching the wind scatter dry leaves across the lawn. I felt lighter, not like someone who'd lost, but like someone who'd put something heavy down. That evening, I opened a box I hadn't touched in years. My husband's things. Old photos, notes, a watch that no longer ticked. Thomas wasn't a good man, but he was part of my story. And in some strange way, forgiving him was easier now that I'd stopped trying to earn forgiveness from everyone else. I held one picture of me and Henry, taken on his 10th birthday. He had cake on his chin. I had a tired smile. We looked like a team, like two people who had each other. I placed it back in the box, gently. Somewhere in the house, the phone buzzed. I didn't check who it was. For once, I wasn't bracing for anyone's disappointment. I didn't owe the world explanations. Not anymore. I curled up in the armchair by the window, a blanket on my lap, tea on the table. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, one by one. It was a quiet life, but it was mine. He showed up 3 days later. Didn't call first. Didn't text. Just knocked. Sharp, impatient. The kind of knock that says, I'm not here to visit. I'm here to fix what I broke, on my terms. I didn't rush to answer. I'd been baking, not because I expected company, but because the smell of cinnamon gave me peace. I dusted flour from my hands, wiped them on a towel, and opened the door. Henry stood there in his hoodie and jeans, looking older than I remembered, and somehow smaller. Not physically, just deflated. Hey, he said. I stepped aside. Come in. He did, glancing around like he expected things to be different. Maybe he imagined the furniture rearranged or the photos of him taken down. But everything was in its place. Only now, The air felt stiller, calmer. "You've been avoiding my calls," he said, sliding his hands into his pockets. "I've been resting," I replied. "Something new I'm trying." He didn't sit, just hovered by the kitchen table. "I wanted to talk face to face," he said. "Then talk." "I shouldn't have said what I said," he began. "I know that. And I shouldn't have taken your help for granted." I nodded, waiting. I'd learned that silence has more power than any speech. If someone's sincerity has weight, it can stand without scaffolding. "I was stressed," he added quickly. "The program is intense. Everyone's got parents with money, connections. I didn't want to feel like I was the kid with the mom at the fryer." There it was again. The shame. He didn't realize that every time he tried to explain himself, he exposed the same wound. And it wasn't mine. "I wasn't asking you to be proud of where I worked," I said. "Just not ashamed." He looked away. "I was ashamed of myself," he said finally. "That I couldn't take care of things on my own. That I needed you. And instead of dealing with that, I blamed you." That one landed. I looked at him, and for a moment I saw my boy again. The one who cried when he scraped his knee, who held onto my hand longer than the other kids at school drop-off. The one who used to say thank you for things as simple as an orange in his lunchbox. "I didn't expect your money," he said. "I got used to it, sure, but I didn't plan for it. And I guess I thought it would always be there." "Because I always was," I said softly. He sat down then, finally, like the truth had pulled the strength out of his knees. "What happens now?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "That depends on you." He nodded slowly, eyes on the grain of the table. "You gave the money to Rachel." "I did." He didn't argue, didn't protest. That surprised me. "She deserves it," he said after a pause. "She's good." "So are you," I said. "But being good isn't enough. You have to choose who you want to be and how you treat people when they can't give you anything back." He swallowed hard. "I'm trying." "I know." We sat there in silence, just the hum of the refrigerator between us. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired a nap fixes, but the kind you feel when your illusions fall apart. "I'm gonna figure things out," he said. "Get a job. Maybe talk to the campus housing office." "I'm sure they'll help you." He nodded. "And I'll pay you back." "You don't owe me money, Henry." "I do," he insisted, "even if it takes years." I met his eyes. "What I want back can't be measured in dollars. But you can still give it." "What do you mean?" "Call me, not when you need something, just because. Ask how I am. Listen to the answer. That's worth more than tuition." He nodded again, slower this time. "I can do that." "I hope you will." He stood. Can I come by again sometime?" "Anytime," I said. "But not as a project, as a person." He smiled, faint and unsure. "Okay." At the door, he turned back. "Thanks for not slamming the door in my face." "I thought about it," I said, and we both laughed. Quiet, weary, but real. When he left, I watched from the window as he walked to his car. He looked over his shoulder once, and I lifted my hand in a wave. He raised his, then climbed in and drove off. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon again. I wrapped the warm loaf in foil and set it on the counter. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew whatever it was, I'd meet it standing tall. Mr. Hammond greeted me at the door of his office like an old friend, though I'd only been there twice in the last 5 years. He looked the same. Thinning hair combed carefully back, tie slightly crooked, glasses perched low on his nose like they always were. "Mary Ann," he said, ushering me in, "I was just about to call you. The documents are ready, all in order." I sat down in the same cracked leather chair as before. The office smelled like paper, wood polish, and the faintest trace of pipe smoke. A scent that reminded me of the past, of men who used to pretend they were in control, and women like me who made it true behind the scenes. Mr. Hammond handed me a folder with a yellow post-it on top. "Final revisions enclosed. Let me know if changes are needed." "I want to go through everything," I said. "Of course." We started with the will. Henry's name had been removed as the sole beneficiary, replaced by Rachel, with clear provisions in case of her passing. A secondary beneficiary was listed, a local scholarship foundation I'd once donated to in memory of my father, who never made it past the 8th grade. "If anything happens to me," I said, "I want what's left to help a girl like Rachel, someone who needs a hand, but also knows how to say thank you." "Understood," Mr. Hammond said, making a note. The trust paperwork was next. He explained it again, slowly, though I'd already read it twice. I appreciated the patience. He didn't talk down to me. He never had. "It's protected," he assured me. "No one can touch it without her consent. Not even family. Especially not family." "Good." He paused, glancing at me over the rim of his glasses. "You've thought this through." "I've been thinking about it for years," I replied. "I just didn't let myself believe I had the right." That made him nod, slow and solemn. "Most people don't come in here until the damage is done. You're different." "Not different," I said. "Just done pretending." He handed me a pen. I signed where he pointed. Steady, firm, no hesitation. My name looked different on paper now, not just a signature, a statement. When we finished, he gathered the pages into a folder and slid it back into his filing cabinet. "It's all official," he said. "If anything changes, you can always amend." "I don't think it will." He leaned back, hands folded on the desk. "You know, I've drafted a lot of wills in my time. Most folks leave everything to children, no matter what. Out of habit, guilt, tradition. I don't often see someone choose what's fair over what's expected." I shrugged. "I lived my whole life doing what was expected. I don't owe tradition one more piece of me." He smiled. "If you ever want help with anything else, financial planning, house paperwork, end-of-life care, you let me know. I might take you up on that." As I walked out of his office, the sun hit my face like a blessing. I didn't usually notice things like that, but it warmed me, straight through my coat. I stopped at the bakery across the street and bought myself a single cupcake. Lemon, with a thick swirl of white icing. It cost more than I'd normally spend on dessert. But I paid for it without flinching. Sat at a table by the window and ate every bite. That night, I took out my binder again. I slid the revised documents into the Estate tab. It fit snugly, like it had always belonged there. Then I pulled out a clean sheet of paper. At the top, I wrote, "What's next?" Underneath, in neat rows, I listed things I'd never let myself put on paper before. Not big dreams, not wild ideas, just real, gentle intentions. Take a day trip to the coast, fix the back fence myself, plant lavender in the yard, call Clara from church and invite her to dinner, try Tai Chi at the senior center, keep baking, even if it's just for me. The list wasn't long, but it was honest, and every word of it belonged to me. For so long, I'd been the woman who bent, who paid, who waited. But now, for the first time, I was the woman who decided. And it felt like a second kind of youth, not in body, but in spirit. One I'd earned the hard way. The letter came on a Thursday. I wasn't expecting anything. I'd just come back from the grocery store. Carrots, flour, some instant coffee I didn't need, but bought anyway because it reminded me of the afternoons when Henry used to sit at the table and pretend to like the taste just to be near me. It was tucked between a flyer for gutter cleaning and the electric bill. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. His had changed over the years. Slanted now, rushed. But the H in Henry still had that little hook at the top, like a hand reaching back. I stood at the kitchen counter and stared at it for a long while. My tea had gone cold by the time I opened it. "Mom, I wasn't sure I should write this. I didn't know if you'd want to hear anything from me, but something tells me you might still read a letter, even if you wouldn't answer a call. I want to start by saying I'm sorry, not just for what I said, but for all the times I didn't say anything, for letting silence become the way I repaid you, for looking at you like you were small when the truth is, I was the one shrinking. I've spent the last week figuring things out. Talking to the financial office, applying for on-campus jobs. I even signed up for tutoring hours in the evenings. It's not easy, but it's doable. And I should have been doing it from the beginning. You didn't owe me anything. I see that now. I thought love meant sacrifice, and I thought your sacrifice would never run dry. But I didn't see the cost. Not really. And I definitely didn't see you. I've been trying to remember the last time I asked how you were doing, without needing something in return. I couldn't come up with one. That shame is mine to carry, not yours. I want you to know I'm proud of you. I know that's backward, the child telling the parent that. But I am. I'm proud that you walked away, that you stood up for yourself, that you didn't let my selfishness take the last of you. I hope you're doing things for yourself now. I hope you're resting, baking, sitting in that chair by the window and watching the light change. I hope you're okay. If you're willing, I'd like to come visit again. Not to fix anything, just to sit. Maybe hear about your new plans. Maybe tell you some of mine. No pressure, no expectations. Just love, if there's any left. Henry. I didn't cry when I finished reading. Not because it didn't move me, but because something in me had already softened, like snow beginning to melt at the edge of a roof. Quiet, patient, unhurried. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer with my recipe cards. Between the one for peach cobbler and the one for zucchini bread, I never quite perfected. It belonged there, among the things made with care. Then I made tea again, fresh, hot, and sat at the window with my notebook. Under my list, I added a new item. Write Henry back. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow, but someday soon. I wouldn't rush it. Not out of pride, but out of truth. Because healing isn't a race, and this time, I wasn't skipping myself to get to someone else's needs. I looked out at the street. Leaves had started to fall in earnest now. Gold, red, rust, like the trees were shedding things too heavy to carry into winter. I understood that, better than most. The grocery store was nearly empty. Tuesday morning, quiet, just the way I liked it. I was in aisle 5, comparing 2 different brands of oatmeal when I heard it. "Excuse me, are you Marianne Wilson?" I turned, a little startled. The woman standing behind me was in her 30s, maybe, with tired eyes but a bright, open face. She held a basket with eggs, a loaf of bread, and one of those overpriced green juices I'd never let myself buy. Her tone wasn't sharp, just curious, like someone searching for a face they weren't sure they'd recognize. "I am," I said slowly. She smiled, more with her eyes than her mouth. I hope this isn't weird. I'm a friend of Rachel's. She told me about you. I blinked. Rachel? Yes. I'm in the nursing program with her. She talks about you all the time. I didn't know what to say. No one had ever recognized me in a grocery store. I wasn't the kind of woman people talked about. Not until now. The woman shifted her basket to her other arm. She said you helped her. Really helped her. With school. With getting back on her feet. She said she wouldn't be where she is without you. I felt something loosen in my chest. Something I didn't know I'd been holding. She said you're the kind of woman we should all be lucky to have in our family. I looked down at the oatmeal boxes, then back at the woman. Well, I said softly, Rachel's the kind of girl who makes it easy to give. She smiled. I just wanted to say thank you. Even if it's secondhand. It matters. And just like that, she was gone, turning the corner into the dairy section like it was nothing. But for me, it wasn't nothing. It was everything. I stood there for a long time, one hand still resting on the oatmeal, thinking about how far a story can travel when it's told by the right voice. Not a viral story, not loud, but real and rooted. Rachel hadn't just taken the gift. She'd carried it, passed it along. She'd said my name to someone else with kindness, and that name had landed in the ears of a stranger who wanted to say thanks. That's legacy. Not money, not property, not titles, but being remembered kindly, even by people you've never met. I bought both boxes of oatmeal. On the way home, I took the long way, through the park where Henry used to chase ducks as a boy, past the library where I once cried behind a row of cookbooks after a particularly cruel phone call from Thomas. The world looked the same, but I didn't walk through it the same. When I got home, I put the groceries away and sat down at the kitchen table with a fresh sheet of paper. I didn't need the notebook this time. I just wrote, Dear Henry, I got your letter. I read it twice, once as your mother, and once as a woman who needed those words more than she realized. Thank you. You were right. I would read a letter even when I couldn't take a call. That hasn't changed. Things here are quiet, but full. I've started baking again. Your favorite lemon bars are on the list, though I may keep this batch for myself. Rachel is doing well. You'd be proud of her. I know I am. And today, in the grocery store, someone said my name like it meant something. Because of her. Because of you, too, in your way. We're all still learning, Henry. And that's okay. Yes, you can come visit. Not to fix anything, just to sit. Maybe I'll tell you about my new garden plans. Maybe you'll tell me something that isn't about grades or bills or pressure. Something real. Just show up. That's enough. Love, Mom. I folded the letter, sealed it, and placed it by the door. Then I made myself tea. Not because I was tired, but because I wanted the warmth. Because the world had changed, and I'd changed with it. Quietly. Steadily. And people were beginning to notice. The senior center smelled like coffee and old wood and something faintly floral. Maybe fabric softener, maybe thyme. I stood in the entryway for a moment, unsure if I belonged. The last time I'd been somewhere just for me, I was 25 and sitting in the back row of a free community college course on bookkeeping. I dropped out after 3 weeks when Henry got the flu and Thomas forgot to pick him up from daycare. That was a lifetime ago. The woman at the front desk smiled like I was expected. You must be Mary Ann, she said. Rachel told us you might stop by. Rachel again. I nodded. I'm here for the Tai Chi class. Room 3, she said, pointing down the hallway. Don't worry, it's not all limber grandmas. Some of us just sway and call it exercise. I liked her immediately. Room 3 had about a dozen people in it, some standing, some sitting, everyone dressed in the universal uniform of retirement. Comfortable shoes, loose clothes, a look of quiet defiance that said, "We made it, and we're not in a rush anymore." The instructor, a gentleman named Paul with silver hair and the kind of calm you can't fake, welcomed me without fanfare. "We start slow," he said. "The goal isn't to master the moves. The goal is to come back." That line stuck with me. I followed along best I could. My knees didn't bend the way they used to, and my balance was more hope than science. But no one looked at me funny when I wobbled. No one corrected me. We moved together, like seaweed in a soft tide, each person honoring their own rhythm. Halfway through, something strange happened. I forgot I was 68. I forgot I'd worked night shifts wiping grease off metal. I forgot that my son had ever made me feel small. All that existed was the sweep of my arms, the slow exhale, the way my feet felt rooted and free at the same time. It wasn't exercise. It was release. After class, someone offered me a seat next to her during tea. Her name was Loretta. She had 2 grandsons and a tiny poodle named Benny, who, according to her, liked country music and hated the mailman. We talked for nearly an hour. About nothing. About everything. I realized I hadn't laughed like that in months. Not the polite chuckle I gave Henry. Not the tight smile I offered customers. Real, out-loud laughter that shook my shoulders and made me wipe my eyes. When I got home, the house didn't feel empty. It felt waiting. I boiled water, poured a bath, and added a handful of Epsom salts from the jar I'd been saving. No occasion, no reason. Just because my body had carried me through another day, and it deserved softness. Lying there, surrounded by steam and silence, I let myself remember things I'd pushed away. Dancing barefoot in the kitchen as a girl. The way the grass felt under my knees the first time Henry learned to walk in the yard. The weight of Thomas's silence when he was 3 days late and smelled like another woman's perfume. None of it broke me. Not then. Not now. Later that night, I added to my list again. Tai Chi on Tuesdays. Call Loretta about lunch. Replace the torn curtains in the living room. Wear perfume just for myself. The list was getting longer. That used to scare me. Now it made me feel something else entirely. Alive. I thought of Henry, of the way his voice had trembled when he said he'd figure things out. I believed him now. Not because he'd promised, but because I no longer needed him to keep that promise for me to stand tall. He'd either show up right or not. I'd be okay either way. And Rachel, sweet, strong Rachel, she'd thrive. I saw to that. And I'd keep seeing to it. Not with sacrifice, but with presence. My life wasn't over. It was opening. Quietly, deliberately. And I was finally walking into it on my own terms. It was Sunday afternoon when he came again. No knock this time. Just the sound of cautious footsteps on the porch, a pause, and then the screen door creaking open. I was already by the stove, making soup, lentil, simple, with garlic and onion, and a little rosemary. The kind of food that forgives you when you've gone too long without warmth. "Hi," Henry said, hovering in the doorway like he didn't know if he was welcome. I didn't turn around right away. Let him sit in it. Let him decide. "You hungry?" I asked finally. He exhaled. maybe in relief. Yeah, I could eat. Bowls are in the cabinet. He moved around the kitchen like a guest in a museum. Careful, quiet. But he remembered. Found the bowls, grabbed two. Poured water from the pitcher without needing to be told. Sat at the table where I'd raised him. I served the soup. Sat across from him. We ate for a while in silence. But it wasn't the heavy silence of before. This one had room in it, like a hallway you could walk through without hitting the walls. He looked tired again, but not defeated, just worn. Like someone who'd finally stopped running and was waiting for the breath to come back. "I've been working at the campus library," he said, spooning soup slowly. "Evenings. It's not much, but it covers meals." I nodded. "That's good." He looked at me, really looked. And I could see he was searching for something more than approval. Something like permission. "I've been thinking a lot," he said, "about what I said to you, about what I didn't say." I waited. "I was afraid," he admitted, "not just of money or failing. Afraid you'd stop loving me if I wasn't doing everything right. So I kept taking, kept pretending I was fine. And when you finally put your foot down, I panicked." He looked down at his bowl. "I didn't see you, Mom. Not really. I saw what you gave me, what you paid, what you sacrificed. But I didn't see you." "You didn't want to," I said gently, "because then you'd have to admit what it cost." He nodded. "I see it now. I'm sorry." There was a long pause. Then quietly, "Is there a way to start over?" I leaned back in my chair. The window was open a crack, and the breeze carried in the smell of someone's backyard barbecue. Sweet smoke, something charred and alive. Life going on, even as we sat in the middle of a long overdue reckoning. "You can't go back," I said. "Not to the version of me who said yes to everything. She's gone." Henry swallowed. "Okay. But you can start here," I added, "if you want." His shoulders sagged in what I recognized not as defeat, but relief. "I do," he said. "Not just because I need help. I'll figure that part out. I mean it. I want to know who you are now. The parts I missed." I studied him for a moment. "You'll have to be patient," I said. "I'm still getting to know her myself." He smiled. Small, genuine. Deal. We talked more after that, about small things. Soup recipes. How his roommate never does dishes. How Rachel is thinking of switching to pediatric nursing. I told him about Tai Chi, about Loretta, about the lemon-scented cleaner I found that doesn't hurt my hands. He didn't pretend to care about all of it. But he listened. And that was enough. When he left, he didn't ask for money. Didn't ask for anything, really. Just hugged me at the door. Not a stiff obligation hug, but one of those long breathing hugs that says, "I see you now, and I'm not going anywhere." I held him back. For a long time, I'd thought forgiveness would feel like surrender, like giving something back to someone who'd thrown it away. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like standing barefoot in warm soil, knowing that even if someone stepped on you once, you could still grow again. It felt like choosing peace, not because you're weak, but because you're finally strong enough to want more than just being right. That night, I wrote in my notebook again. Just one sentence. "Let people love you when they're ready, not when you beg." And I went to bed without waiting for the past to explain itself. Because the present, finally, was enough. The house smelled like apples and cinnamon. Not the artificial kind, not a candle or a spray. Real apples. Peeled and sliced by hand, sprinkled with sugar and nutmeg, laid gently into a crust I'd made that morning, while the radio played soft jazz in the background. The windows were cracked just enough to let the afternoon in. The air was cool, not yet winter, but full of that quiet edge that makes you reach for a sweater even in your own home. Rachel was setting the table. She moved with the comfort of someone who'd grown into the space. She didn't ask where the plates were anymore. She just knew. Henry was on the floor with a wrench, tightening the leg of the old armchair that had wobbled since 2009, and only now, suddenly, mattered enough to fix. I stood at the kitchen counter, hands deep in dough again, rolling out the remnants to make hand pies for Rachel to take home. She liked the small ones, said they reminded her of being a kid, even though no one in her house had baked. No one but me. "Smells like Thanksgiving," Rachel called from the dining room. "It's just pie," I said. "Yeah, and warmth and love and a little bit of joy. So, basically, Thanksgiving." I smiled, but said nothing, just kept rolling. Henry finished with the chair and walked into the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel like I used to do when he was small. He didn't reach for his phone, didn't check the time. He just stood near me for a moment. "You always used to hum when you baked," he said quietly. "I still do," I replied. "You just stopped hearing it." "I hear it now." That was enough. We sat down together not long after. No big speeches, no celebration, just soup, warm bread, apple pie. A meal. The thing that had always tethered us, even when words failed. I watched them eat. Watched Rachel tease Henry about his new haircut. Watched Henry ask about her classes, without sounding like he was pretending. The house felt full, but not crowded. There was room for all of us. Not just at the table, but in the space between who we were and who we were becoming. After dessert, Henry offered to do the dishes. Rachel stacked them for him and dried as he washed. I sat back and let them. Not out of exhaustion, but because it was good to be served, even in small ways. I went to the living room and settled into the now stable armchair, a blanket draped over my knees. Outside, the light had gone that soft amber color it gets right before dusk. Everything glowed a little. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't feel like I was waiting. Not for a call, not for an apology, not for a better day. This, the warmth in my chest, the quiet peace of a house filled with people who were trying. This was the better day. I closed my eyes and listened. Rachel humming as she wiped the counter. Henry laughing, not loud, but real. The faint clink of dishes being put away. The wind moving through the trees outside. No drama, no fireworks. Just the gentle rhythm of healing, of people who had hurt each other, learning how to sit in the same room again. I thought back to all the nights I'd spent scrubbing fryer oil from my arms. All the mornings I'd stood in the bank line, depositing what little I had for a boy who didn't say thank you. All the moments I'd swallowed my words, convinced that love meant silence. And now, here, in the dimming light of a regular Sunday, I felt something I hadn't known I'd been missing. Dignity. Not the kind that comes with titles or applause. The kind that grows quiet and firm inside your chest when you finally stop asking the world to notice your worth and start living like you believe in it yourself. Rachel brought me a slice of pie wrapped in foil before she left. She kissed my cheek and said, "You're the reason I want to be the kind of nurse that doesn't forget people." Henry lingered a little longer, helping me carry a few things upstairs, walking slower than he needed to, like he didn't want the moment to end. At the door, he hugged me again, longer this time. "I'm proud to be your son," he said. And I believed him. After they left, I stood alone in the hallway, listening to the quiet again. But it wasn't the lonely quiet of before. It was the kind that fills you up. I went to bed early, not because I was tired, but because I wanted to wake up sooner to another ordinary day. The kind I used to think didn't count. The kind that, now, felt like proof that I had made it, that I had changed, that I had stayed true. I didn't get rich. I didn't get famous. I didn't get everything I deserved. But I got this. This home, this peace, this quiet power in my own name. I remained myself. And somehow, in the end, that was enough. If you'd like, I can now compile the entire story in one file or prepare a version formatted for publication, posting, or printing. Just let me know how you'd like to proceed.